Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think now it's 3, so almost time. Mm, I request everybody to mute themselves. Okay, so it's almost time. So hello, everybody.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello. So I'm Yuma Mukherjee. So I want to give you just a brief understanding about the cognitive psychology, for which I want to present a PPT. So I'm just presenting. Please let me know it is visible or not. Can you see the PPT slide? Hello.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm starting with the unit 1 of, as you all know, MPC 001. This is the first paper. It covers mainly the cognitive psychology, the learning and memory. So this cognitive psychology, it actually has some 4 units. It consists of mainly the 4 units. So that is the unit 1, which is the definition and description part of what is cognitive psychology, and it covers also the methods with the domains of the cognitive psychology and the metaphor of cognition, Then Unit 2, it covers mainly the information in learning and memory with the models like the Benjamin Bloom's suggestions of cognition and memory. And also there are some other domains of learning, memory, as well as some important roles of it. Then Unit 3, it covers mainly the neurological basis of learning and memory and hypothetical stages of learning and memory, which includes the stages like encoding, storage, and retrieval. And last, the Unit 4, it covers there are some models of information processing. So, in brief, I will cover the models of information processing. So, if you have any question, I will try to complete my today's lesson within 20 minutes before, so that you can ask any question. Okay, so this is all about today's topic that I have to cover. Now, what is the definition mainly, or what we actually mean by the cognitive psychology? It is a study of mental processes such as perceiving, remembering, reasoning, and thinking about information. Now, what type of information? How we actually remember, or what are the memory processes, and why we actually sometimes forget anything. So, all of these things covers the cognitive part, that is the cognitive psychology. Now, the cognitive psychology, it is the mainly the study of what the people actually perceives, what they learn, they remember, they think about any type of information, and why sometimes they forgets about any particular thing, or any learning material, or any type of other things. So all of this covers mainly the cognitive domain. Now, there are 2 points about these overall examples of the cognitive psychology. What are they? Actually, all represents the instances of difficulty or failure of mental processes. So, we rarely think of them unless they fail to work. So, sometimes the failure takes place, and it is also the mental processes. That means due to lack of rehearsal, or due to some frustrating situation, or maybe some other extraneous variable, we actually sometimes forgets anything. Now, the cognitive psychology is interested in what is generally called the mental phenomena. Now, what are the mental phenomena? And say, for example, the mental phenomena are perception, learning, memory, thinking, etc. So, this is the scientific study of the mind. Now, there are some research methods in cognitive psychology. So, why we are actually learning about these methods of this cognitive psychology? To get an idea about the goals of research, or where we actually use this methods of cognitive psychology. So, there are some distinctive research methods, namely the experiments or on human behavior, then psychological research, then self-reports, that is the case studies, and obviously it includes the naturalistic observation. And number 4, the computer simulations and artificial intelligence. So these are the important research methods in cognitive psychology. Now, experiments on human behavior, that means it actually needs a laboratory setup where the experimenter conducts the research, and mainly there is an experimental a tool or an instrument, and we actually knows that there are two kinds of variables, that is the independent variable in a research work and dependent variable, and obviously there are some irrelevant variables too, or any type of extraneous variable. Now, under this psychobiological research, it includes mainly the brain postmortem or any type of cerebral processes to get an information about some cerebral processes, how it works, and it is done by any type of imaging, getting some brain image techniques. So this is the second most important type of research, that is the psychobiological research. Now number three is the self-report or the case studies, where the subject will self-report. That means the individual's own range of context, or the account of cognitive processes, or due to some help of some case studies. That is, what is case studies? It is an in-depth studies of any individual. And as well as it includes a naturalistic observation. That means detailed studies of what that person is observing or going through that particular situation, etc. Number four, it is the computer simulations and artificial intelligence. Now we all know what is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is the study of the way the computer can copy the way the human thinks. So in this particular research, what happens? There is the digital computer. It actually played a fundamental role in the emergence of the study of any type of cognitive psychology. Now, the next slide, it covers the domains of cognitive psychology. Now, these are the common domains of psychology. Like, it starts with the cognitive neuroscience, the perception, the thinking and concept formation, attention, representation of knowledge, consciousness, memory, and imagery. Now, what is the cognitive neuroscience? It covers mainly the within as we know that within the past few years have cognitive psychologists and the cognitive neuroscientists, they work together, and they are working together to find a relationship between these two. So this cognitive psychologists, they are seeking the neurological explanations for their findings. What are the neurological functions of the brain and how it is related with the behaviors of ours, and also the memory support system, and what are the electrochemical processes going on in the brain, etc. The next one is the perception. So it is another most important branch that directly involved with the detection of the interpretation of the sensory stimuli is perception. So that we are perceiving in this environment. So all of this includes this perception. Now here, from experiments in perception, we have some good understanding of the sensitivity of the human organisms and to sensory signals, and more important, to cognitive psychology of the way we interpret the sensory signals. So perception is another most important domains of cognitive psychology. Then number three, it is the thinking and concept formation. Now, what is this thinking and concept formation? It is actually the procedure of thinking, or how we actually have the formation of concept of any type of thing that we are perceiving in the environment through our sense organs, like when we see an object, when we hear anything, when we feel anything, tastes or smell, etc. Then comes the attention. Now, what does this attention mean? Now, we are gathering some information from the environment, and it is evident that under normal circumstances we are also highly selective in amount and type of information to which we attend. So that is, there is a capacity to actually take, or there is a capacity to process this information, and it seems to be limited to two levels. What are they? They are the sensory level and the cognitive. Now, sensory means if too many sensory clues are imposed upon as at any given time, we can become overloaded. So, while when we are attending to something or concentrating on anything, so we can memorize it more quickly. Now comes the next, that is the consciousness. Now, consciousness is the next important part, that is the definition of it is the current awareness. Now, current awareness of what? Of the external situation as well as the internal circumstances. So, this there are some unscientific definitions given in this consciousness and unconsciousness, but here in this cognitive psychology, consciousness is the most important thing, because consciousness has gained some respectability, and recently, and now it is concept as a serious modern topic of this cognitive psychology. And if you learn the psychoanalysis of Sigmund Freud, there you will find the consciousness and the unconscious conditions. They are actually the functions, or the abnormality actually lies in the unconscious mind of the human behavior. Now, then comes the memory. This memory and perception, they actually work together. Why? Because the memory means the information that is stored in our brain, and the informations available to us, they comes from our perception that we are perceiving from the environment, the short term memory, and it goes to, by the help of some rehearsals or learning it again and again, it goes to the long term memory, which is more stable. Now, this it is known as short-term memory, or STM, and long-term memory, or LTM. Now, the another point is the representation of knowledge. Now, what is this representation of knowledge means? Now, the fundamental of all human cognition is the representation of knowledge. Now, how the information is symbolized and combined with the things which are actually stored in our brain. So, if we learn the structure of the brain and the functions of the parts of the brain, then we will understand that how it actually functions. So, the last one is the imagery. Imagery means any cognitive mapping. That means cognitive psychologists are specially interested in the topics of what happens internally. That means the internal representations of knowledge. But it actually, the main root cause is the cognitive mapping. That means the mental images of the environment are formed in the form of some cognitive mapping, and that is the internal representations of the any type of object or thing. And so this is the domains, the important domains of this cognitive psychology. Now the next slide is about the other domains, that is a language. And language is the actually the principal, it is the principal means by which we acquire and express the knowledge, and the study of how we actually express ourselves, it is the language. And human language development, it represents a unique kind of abstraction. So language also influences what? The perception and the fundamental aspect of cognition. Now, after this language comes the developmental psychology. Now, that means the overall development of the child from the birth till death. Now, the developmental psychology is another important area of cognitive psychology, and that has been intensely studied. And this how actually the development or the brain development, the maturity actually takes place, these helps. There are some recent studies and theories in this developmental cognitive psychology, and it goes hand in hand with this cognitive psychology, because how this maturity takes place, it covers that portion. That means the maturity or the development of the brain, the motor coordination, etc. Then comes the thinking and concept formation. Now, thinking is the main or crown jewel of this cognition. Why? Because thinking, it is the process by which the new mental representation is formed, and through the transformation of the information that is stored in the memory. So this is another most important part. Then comes the human and artificial intelligence. Now, as I told you that human intelligence, it includes the ability to do something, acquire something, recall anything, any past memories, or to use some knowledge that is gathered from the environment, or to understand the concrete and abstract concepts, and as well as the relationship among the objects and the ideas. So these are the main domains of this cognitive psychology. Now, then comes the next slide. It covers mainly the brief history of this cognitive psychology. Now, brief history means sorry, this slide, slide number 7. Yes. So the history of this cognitive psychology, it starts from the early thoughts on thinking, then the Renaissance period or the cognition in the Renaissance and beyond, then the early 20th century, and lastly as cognitive psychology as it is today. Now, in the early thoughts of thinking, like the work of Solso or Macklin, etc., and some other important thoughts starting from the ancient Greek philosophers, Aristotle, Plato. The main two ideas that were described by in that period was the empiricist and the nativist. Now, what are they? The empiricists, they maintain that knowledge comes from experience that we are gathering from the environment, and the nativist, they suggest that no, knowledge is based on the innate characteristics, innate capacities of the brain. So these were the two main ideas. And ancient Egyptian, they suggest that the authors believe that knowledge was localized in the heart, and a view shared by the early Greek philosopher Aristotle, but not by Plato. And they believed that brain was the locus of all the knowledge. So this was the main idea of the early thoughts on thinking. Then during this Renaissance, what happens, there were some philosophers or theologians, they were satisfied that knowledge was located in the brain, the same idea, but they considered that knowledge was acquired not only through the physical senses, but by the help of the sensory organs like the touch, taste, smell, vision, hearing, etc. And there are some divine sources uh, by the help of which we are actually getting this knowledge. Now, after that, during the 18th century, when the philosophic psychology was brought to the point, then what happens? Then the British empiricists, some of the names or some of the scientific psychologists like George Berkeley, like David Hume, like later James Mill, they actually, like Mill suggested that there were some internal representations of this. That means there is a direct sensory events and there is some faint copies of perception, that is the actually termed as the memory or the thinking storage. And number three, there is a transformation of these faint copies as in associated thoughts. Now, after 18th century, in the 19th century, some important eminent psychologists like Gaster Fechner, like Brentano, like Hermann Helmholtz, William Wundt, J. Muller, Kulpi, Hermann Ebbinghaus, etc., Galton, Edward Titchener, William James, they said that from their point of view was different. Like they said that as the last half we have seen that there were, according to Mill, there were three internal representations, but according to them, they started another point of view. They said that the discipline based on the empirical results rather than on speculation. And by the last half of this 19th century, these theories of representation of knowledge were clearly dichotomous. That means Wundt and Titchener and Brentano, they said that thus there is they emphasized on mainly the structure of the mental representation as well as the functions. Now, after this, the same in the same time, that is the 19th century, some eminent American psychologists like James, then from the who established the first psychological laboratory in America, and his famous in 1890, his famous book, that is the Principles of Psychology. He said that or he gave an vivid expression about the reason model of the mind. And James most direct link, he said that there is a direct link between the modern cognitive psychology with the viewpoint of the memory, that is the inner potential of an human being. So this was the idea of James. Then after that, there were some other eminent psychologists like F.C. Donders, then James Cattell, etc. They performed various experiments on this, on perception and how we actually perceive anything, and how we remember through it, what are the mental operations and procedures, etc. Now, after that, cognitive psychology in early 20th century, the representation of knowledge took the radical turn. Why? Because the behaviorism or the gestalt psychologists, their opinion were different from the previous psychologists. So the behaviorist views of the human and the animal psychology, they were cast on mainly the stimulus and response psychology. That means there is an effect of the stimulus and for which the response happens. So the gestalt theories, they said, or they elaborated on this topic, that is the internal representation within the context of isomorphism, that is one-to-one relationship between the representation and the reality. Now, there were some other psychological studies and research work in the late 19th century, which covers the behavioral other aspects, the operations of mind, the structures of attention, consciousness, memory, thinking, etc. Then, after 1932, there were some other cognitive revolution that swept across psychology, and that is eminent Edward Tolman from the University of California at Berkeley. He published his famous purposive behavior in animals and men, and where he said that according to him, or he observed through his experiments mainly, that the rats learn in a maze is the layout of the land rather than simply a series of SR connections. So the animal, according to Tolman's interpretation, they gradually developed a picture of his environment that was later used to find the goal. Now, after that, Sir Frederick Bartlett from Cambridge University, his famous, in 1932, he wrote Remembering, in which he rejected the popular view that what happens in the memory, or the memory, or how we actually forget anything. And he his famous study of the means of nonsense syllable, he introduced this. And the famous Ebbinghaus in Germany, there were some other research work on this memory nonsense syllable. And later on, Bartlett argued that the use of rich and meaningful material under naturalistic condition would yield far more significant conclusions. So these were the the cognitive psychology in early 20th century. Then after that, cognitive psychology as it is today. Now, after this 1950s, they actually, the main light or main focus was on the attention. That means if we attend to anything or concentrate, then we can easily memorize that thing. After that, memory, it is another important aspect of mind. Then the how we actually memorize the any type of pattern recognition, or any type of images, or language processes, thinking, and obviously consciousness. So these were the main topic, and there were various experiments and research work on this. There were some journals where there were some professional groups who found that yes, these are the main units of this cognitive psychology. And they established different theories on the basis of this. So this was the main that I have to cover, that is the history of this cognitive psychology. And after that, I will go to the next slide, which covers the information processing in learning memory, how it actually, what are the main points to be discussed here. Now, the information processing in learning memory or anything, it is actually the how we store the any type of thing that we are perceiving, or what are our capacities of storing, or the ability to store anything. So memory plays such an important part, and it covers the various things, like from the environment that we are going through, that we are learning, etc. And how this learning and memory, it actually combines with each other. Now, this learning and memory, it as learning, actually it is acquiring any type of knowledge, and behaviors also, skills, the value system, the preferences, the understanding, everything, and may involve some synthesizing and processing different types of information. So, for this information processing in learning and memory, the first important model or domains given by Benjamin Bloom in 1965. We will just go in brief what are the main topics that he mentioned in this domains of learning. So, where the most important one is the cognitive, that is how we recall anything, how we calculate, discuss, analyze, how we solve any type of problems, and what are the psychomotor functioning like to dance, swim, drive a car, etc. And affective to like something or someone, we actually appreciate anything, fear, worship, hatred, etc. So this is the cognitive um, area that Benjamin Bloom's mentioned. The next one is the memory. Now, memory is usually divided into three storage systems. What are they? They are the sensory memory, the short-term memory, and the long-term memory. Now, what is the sensory memory? It is affiliated with the transduction of energy, change from one form of energy to another, and the environment makes available a variety of sources of information like light, sound, smell, heat, cold, etc. And there is a limitation, or this memory is very short and it stays for half second for vision and about 3 seconds for hearing. Now, after this sensory memory comes the short term memory, that is the STM. So, this after entering this sensory memory, a limited amount of information is transferred into this short term memory. Now, how this happens? There is a selective attention determines what information moves from the sensory memory to the short term memory or the STM. And the STM is most often stored as sounds, and especially in recalling something, recalling any words, any numbers, any numericals, etc. But may be stored as images. And it works basically just like the computer's RAM, that is a random access memory. So this is the STM, and the brief duration that is mentioned by Miller in 1956. He said by some experiments and the research work that it mainly lasts from 3 to 20 seconds. And this decay appears to be the primary mechanisms of this memory loss. And after that, comes the okay, so one thing I have to include, that this short term memory, there are three basic operations. What are they? They are, number one, the iconic memory, that is the ability to hold the visual images, because we actually hold the visual images very fast. And the acoustic, that means the ability to hold any sounds, like any rhythmic tune it may be. So this STM and LTM, we will see afterwards how it goes to the LTM, or how this information is stored in the LTM. That is the next part. And this LTM is it is mainly the permanent storage. Why? Because the information is stored on the basis of some meaning or some importance. That means it actually needs, we actually need to memorize that. And the process of transferring this information from STM to LTM, that is a long term memory, involves an encoding or consolidation of information. So this is all about this long term memory. Here it is more permanent storage, stable, and due to some help of some rehearsal, this Knowledge goes from the STM to the LTM. Now, the knowledge we stored in the LTM, it affects our perceptions of the world. And what happens, it contrast with the in contrast with the short term memory and perceptual memory, in that information can be stored for extended periods of time and limits of its capacity are not known. So by the help of some schemas, now what are the schemas? The schemas are the mental models of the world, and the information in LTM is stored in interrelated networks of these schemas. So this is all about Benjamin Bloom's domains of this learning and how this memory happens. Now after this, the next slide uh, is about the cognitive information processing. That means the information processing is the change of information in any manner that is detectable by the observer, and it is the field of cognitive psychology, that means where the information processing is an approach to the goal of understanding how we actually thinks, how we behaves, how we works, or the functioning. So for this, what are the principles of this information? It is very important to know the principles. So according to Hewitt in 2000, what are the basic principles of this information processing system? They are four in numbers. Number one, the first is the assumption of a limited capacity of the mental system, and this actually means the amount of the information that we wants to or which is important, which is not important. That means the selection of it, or it is the first principle, and it is the assumption of the limited capacity of the mental state. And the next principle is that it controls the mechanism is required to oversee the encoding, and after encoding, what happens, the transformation of it, then what are the processed, how it's stored, that is the storage system, and retrieval and utilizing of information. So all of this we can find in the Atkinson and Shiffrin model that I will go afterwards, of 1971. Now the third principle is that there is a two-way flow of information. Why two-way flow? Because we constantly use information that we gather through the senses, like a bottom-up processing, and information we have stored in memory, that is top-down processing. So it is known as the two-way. In a dynamic it is a dynamic process, and we construct the meaning about our environment. And for this, the it is most important to know what is the inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is nothing but going from the specific instances to a general conclusion, and the deductive reasoning is just the opposite, going from the general principle to the specific examples. The fourth principle was generally accepted by this cognitive psychologist, in that the human organism has been generally prepared to process and organize the information in some specific way. So that is the most important thing. And for example, say language development is similar in all human infants, regardless of any language spoken by adults or the area in which they live, or rural versus urban, etc. So these are the main four principles of information processing by Hewitt in 2000, described by Hewitt. Then after that, the another important point is the information processing in learning and memory, where I will start with the primary areas of cognition studied by the research in memory. And this information processing in learning and memory, here we will first um, go through the Schachter and Tulvin's in 2001. They stated that memory system is defined in terms of its brain mechanisms and the kind of information it processes and the principles of its operation. So they suggested that memory is combined with all the mental experiences that we are gathering from the environment. And in this light, they focused on the memory, how we actually recall anything, or retrieval processes, storage, etc. Then comes the cognitive information processing model, that is the CIP of learning, where what is the CIP mean actually? This the cognitive information processing model of learning. It presents the a paradigm of this cognitive behavioral psychology, and the model articulates the limited capacity of only the working memory. That means the memory which are actually need to do any type of work, and this working memory is tasked with the burden of processing incoming information, transferring information to the long term memory, and retrieval of this information from this long term memory or this LTM. Now, this information processing in memory can be viewed from the computer model perspective. The functioning is the same. So like the computer, the human mind takes in information, performs anything, operates, then store the information, then retrieves when it is needed, etc. So these were the main idea of this CIP, that is a cognitive information processing model. Now, the next, the development of this memory and the information processing. Now, according to Nasser 1967, he stated that cognition is the encoding, structuring, storing, retrieving, using, and or otherwise learning knowledge. So, there are some important developmental aspects for each of these activities. So, according to Flavel, in 2002, he said that this information processing perspective of the it covers mainly the brain, what the brain changes, that means the biological maturation or the experience, then increased processing capacity, maybe the speed, the efficiency, and the result of both the maturation and the knowledge development, that means the cognitive development. Then the modifications of these connections in this neural network, and also the emergent concepts, the new emergent concepts arising from this repeated self-organization as a result of adapting to the demands of a changing environment, and lastly the increased capacity for problem solving and this metacognition. Now, what is this encoding means actually? Encoding, it is the initial processing of the stimulus or event, and by the help of maturation and experience, this process actually leads to any type of LTM or long-term memory. It helps. So, in terms of this maturation, according to Dempster 1981, he suggests that the adult capacity for this STM of this 5 plus 2 digits might be as much as 2 digit, and for the children of 5 and 1 digit lower for children age 9. So these were some of the research work, and after that,
Sorry,
what
doctor.
happens after this structuring?
Sorry,
Yes,
doctor, for
sorry,
disturbing. There is one is called Ahmad Solesi. I don't know. He's presenting. We missed your presentation.
sorry.
There is one is presenting. We missed your presentation. Who is called is Ahmad Salusi. I don't know. He has to stop his presentation as well. So
Okay, so you can't see the presentation, right? There is any
mm,
problem in?
Yes, Ahmed, he has to stop. Like, yeah, I don't know. He's using phone. Ahmed, you are using phone. Yes,
Ma'am, what he meant is that
Yes,
somebody
he's Ahmad
else
Suleiman.
is trying
Please,
to do,
Ahmad.
yeah,
somebody else
yeah,
is presenting something, so it's disturbing your PPT. This is what he
yeah,
means.
Okay, sorry.
yeah.
So
Then
this
I
guy has to stop his presentation.
okay.
Yeah,
Now
he's
you can
dividing the
see the.
class into two.
Sorry. Now I can. I think you can see the PPT. Hmm? If there is any problem, please let me know. Hmm? Sorry.
Please go ahead, man. Yeah, true. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So I was telling about the encoding and the structuring and organizing. Now, how this structuring and organizing of this information it happens? It happens due to some learning processes and the maturity of the what the ability of the child to grasp the information that he or she gets from the environment, the capacities, and both this maturation and experience it actually helps to that child to remember anything. So this is the main idea of the structuring and organizing of this information or experience. Now then comes the storage and retrieval. It is the most important part of this memory system. Why? Because the information can be stored and retrieved relative to a stimulus or event, and it also changes over time. So for example, prior to about age 7 months, an infant will not seek an object that has been shown and then removed from view. So this infant has encoded the object and will reach for it, but seems to lose interest as soon as it is no longer in view. So it actually it is an example of storage and retrieval. Now, according to Flavin in 2002, there are four observations about the strategy development of this storage and memory. The strategy development is not linear. Why? When developing any particular strategy development will often stall or even regress before it becomes systematically and correctly used. And number two, the strategy will continue to develop after it is first demonstrated in its mature form, and this continued development may take months or even years. Now, for which we will just have an idea about the theories. What are the theories of this information processing? Now, there are some important theories of to explain this information processing that I will just cover in brief. It starts with the Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive domain. It actually there were various research works in 1965, and Bloom he proposed that information processing can be classified in 6 levels, and the first level is labeled as knowing anything from the environment or from the material, and this involves very little elaboration. Then second level it comes with the or labeled as the comprehension part, and it requires some rudimentary levels of understanding it. And after that, the next two levels are the application and analysis part. Now how we apply, where to apply, and the analysis part is very important. And the next two levels are the synthesis and evaluation. That is the most important part and the complex part, and it requires the highest levels of elaboration. And this synthesis actually it involves putting the parts or components together in an original manner. And while evaluating anything, or evaluation is the process of making these judgments based on comparison to a standard. So this was all about Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive domain. Then comes Sternberg's information processing approach of 1988, where Sternberg's theory, he suggests that development is skill based and continuous rather than staged and discontinuous, as stage theorists believe. Yes, sorry.
Hello, ma.
Sorry, yes. Any problem? Please
Yes,
let
ma.
me
The
know.
screen you are sharing before, we are not seeing it now.
You can't see the screen.
We are not seeing it. It's the one you are sharing before. We are not seeing
Ma'am,
it
we
now.
can see the screen.
No, please, you
Can you
have
see the
to.
screen? It is visible,
You
I
have to
think.
take
I am
Yes.
sharing the screen with you.
Yes, it is visible.
just you
Okay.
have to click on it.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. So I'm continuing. So the Sternberg's information
The
processing.
screen is visible from here. Maybe it's from your side, sir. Please don't destroy. It's visible, please. Don't destroy our accounts. Yeah.
You can rejoin again, please.
Actually, I'm sharing the screen and I think you can see the screen. Sorry.
Ma'am, we
So-
can see you. Please carry on, ma'am. We can see the screen.
Okay. Thank you. So Sternberg's information processing approach. This is another approach, most important approach of information processing of 1988, where his main focus was that the development is skill based and continuous rather than staged and discontinuous, as stage theorist believes, and it is focused on the intelligence of the person. That means this focus on intelligence actually separates its ideas from the stage theorist, and because it rejects the idea of incremental stages. So this was the main concept of this Sternberg's information processing approach, that is, it is skill based and continuous rather than staged and discontinuous, as stage theorist believes. Now, in Sternberg's 1988 model, there were mentioned three components of works together with the learning and the cognitive development. What are they? They are the meta components are executive in nature, that is number one. They guide the whole, that means the planning of the anything, the decision making part, the problem solving area, etc. And the performance components, that is the actions that like the actions taken in the completion of any type of problem solving task. And performance components go beyond the meta components because the difficulty level is more extent here. And the Sternberg's third, he proposed that the type of intelligence is the knowledge acquisition component, and this type of character, this type is mainly characterized by the ability to learn any new any new informations that we are gathering from the environment, and the potentials to hold it. So this was the Sternberg's viewpoint on this information processing. So this was all about the theories, the main two theories that I have discussed, that is the Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive domain and the Sternberg's information processing approach. Now the next slide is about the neuropsychological basis of learning and memory. That means the how the functions of brain, what are the structures of brain, how it actually helps to store any type of memory, retrieve the storage, etc. Now, how this learning and memory, what are the relation between these two things? Like learning is, it is the process of acquiring some new informations, whereas memory, it refers to the persistence of the learning in a state that can be revealed at a later time or later period. So this learning then has an outcome and we refer to that as memory. Now, this learning and memory can be subdivided into major some hypothetical stages that I have discussed earlier, that is the encoding, the storage, the retrieval, and this encoding stage has two separate steps. What are they? They are the acquisition of the knowledge and the consolidation. Now this acquisition, it registered the inputs in the sensory buffers and the sensory analysis stages, while the consolidation creates a stronger representations of over time. Whereas the storage, that you all know, the storage, it is the result of this acquisition and consolidation, and it creates and maintains a permanent recording in the brain. And finally comes the last, that is a retrieval. It utilizes the stored information to create a conscious representation or to execute a learned behavior like any type of activity, motor act, functioning, etc. Now, so these were the relation between this learning and memory. So, what are the main objectives to learn the relationship between these two? What are the processes of the memory in the brain? Then what are the neurological issues related to the brain? And obviously, what are the neuropsychological basis of learning and memory? So this is how these two are related. So memory and brain, this is the most important part. That means how the memory takes place, what are the functions of the memory, or the neuroscientific studies of memory. They actually focuses on how due to some theories, they focuses on the memory to investigate how there is a specific neural circuits and systems enable the learning process and the retention of some specific forms of knowledge or material. So the human memory and brain damage and amnesia, that is a very important part where there is a deficits in memory takes place, and where the deficits in memory as a function of brain damage due to some brain damage or due to some diseases or some psychological trauma or any type of accidents, that is known as amnesia. Now this amnesia can involve either the inability to learn anything or loss of any type of previous knowledge or both. And this loss of memory, why it happens, that I told you, there are some various reasons for it, due to some accident, some disease, some brain damage, etc. And the brain surgery and memory loss, the next part, that is the there are some research work or on 1940 or mainly before 1950, where the surgeons, they attempted to treat the neurological and the psychiatric diseases using some specific neurosurgical procedures on it. They include the prefrontal lobotomy, that means removing or disconnecting the prefrontal lobe. Then the corpus callosotomy, that is the surgical sectioning of this corpus callosum region of the brain. Then removing the amygdala, that means the removing that part. Then the temporal lobe resection, that means removal of this temporal lobe, etc. So there were various research works on this, and one surgical procedures relevant to memory was removal of medial portion of this temporal lobe, including the some important part of the brain, that is the hippocampal formation. And eminent neurosurgeons like William Beecher Scoville, his famous medical conference in 1953, where he mentioned or he reported in Montreal Neurological Institute, he reported on bilateral removal of medial temporal lobe in one epileptic patient and several schizophrenic patients. Now schizophrenic, that you all know that it is a psychotic disorder. So this type of research work was by William Beecher Scoville, And then bilateral, this resection of this uncus and amygdalum both, or in conjunction with the entire amygdaloid hippocampus complex, it also happens. There were some behavioral and physiological changes after this type of surgery, and with one exceptions of a very grave recent memory loss. And there were some other experiments or works of Scoville in 1954. Then Brenda Milner, he was an eminent neuropsychologist. His famous examinations of 10 patients, where he found that memory impairments in the patients having medial temporal lobe resections as a part of their treatment were in relation to how much of the medial temporal lobe was removed. Now, this bilateral resection and hippocampus resulted in severe amnesia. So, this is a very important two stages of this brain, and this severe amnesia happens by this. And in comparison, in one patient whose entire right medial temporal lobe, that is the hippocampus and the hippocampal gyrus, was removed, where the residual memory deficit was found. And this interestingly, there was an surgery where the patient was a young man who had a bilateral medial temporal resection, and there was a severe amnesia. So this was this amnesia part, that means the memory loss, how it happens, what are the findings or the research works after the surgery, and what are the main structures of the brain, the removal of which this amnesia happens or takes place, etc. Now, this amnesia and the medial temporal lobe, that is another important part. Now, which region or regions of the medial temporal lobe were critical for supporting this long-term memory ability? Now, this medial temporal lobe area, it includes the various part, that is the amygdala, the hippocampus, the entorhinal cortex, and surrounding by the parahippocampal and perihynal cortical areas. And so this is an important and vast covering of the brain, as you can see. And for the past 40 years, there were scientists who were going on researching, or there were various surgical reports about the lessons or how this theory of memory happens, or the amnesia and their neural, what are the basis of this amnesia. And there were various reports who performed the surgery where it indicates due to some magnetic resonance imaging, that is the MRI. By the help of that, we can easily find out that which portions are responsible, which portions of the brain are responsible for this type of amnesia. And after that, the next slide, I will move to the next slide, that is the yes. So this is all about the memory consolidation and hippocampus. That means the memories are solidified in this long-term storage over days, weeks, months, and even years. Now, this process is referred to as consolidation, and old concept that refers to how this long-term memory develops over time after some initial acquisition. Now, from this cognitive neuroscience perspective, the consolidation is conceived of as biological changes that underlie the long-term retention of this learned information, and we can ask what brain structures and systems support this process. Now, hippocampus, it is a most important area of the brain, and because the damage to the medial temporal lobe does not wipe out most of the declarative memories formed over a lifetime. We know that the hippocampus is not the repository of stored knowledge. Rather, the medial temporal lobe, it appears to support the process of forming this new type of memories. That means the new type of knowledge that we are gathering from the environment. Um, so this is the memory consolidation and hippocampus, where we can it is very important to know this alcoholic Korsakov's syndrome and diencephalic amnesia. What is that? Now, the medial temporal lobe is not the only area of the interest of human memory. So this amnesia, it emerges from brain damage in other regions too. So for example, damage to midline structure of the diencephalon of the brain, it causes a serious amnesia. Now, the prime structures are the dorsomedial neural nucleus of the thalamus as well as the mammillary bodies. Now, so damage to these midline subcortical region can be caused by any type of stroke, any type of tumors, and any metabolic problems like those brought on by chronic alcoholism as well as by any type of trauma. So this is all about the alcoholic Korsakoff syndrome or diencephalic amnesia. Then comes the anterior and the lateral temporal lobes and memory. Now, how this amnesia happens? The neocortex, it is another crucial for the storage of memories or storage of anything, any inputs or knowledge, and then it should be possible to demonstrate the retrograde amnesia with cortical damage, even though most amnesias are in anterograde. And we will see that how this amnesia or this how it can cause by damage to regions of the neocortex and the pre-hippocampal cortex, how if these regions are damaged, what type of amnesia takes place. And there were some other important thing like Alzheimer's. Now, progressive neurological disease like it is most common Alzheimer's disease and herpes. So it is a simplex encephalitis involving viral infection of the brain are two such conditions that causes amnesia or damage. And there were some patients with dense retrograde amnesia, like it might still form new long-term memories, and this type of amnesia is also known as isolated retrograde amnesia. That means it is particularly related to damage of the anterior temporal lobe, and this portion of the temporal lobe is not therefore essential for acquiring the new information. So this was the main idea of this anterior and the lateral temporal lobes and memory, and if the damage of this region, how it causes this Alzheimer's and other types of amnesia. Now, the next part that I have to cover is the animal models of memory. Now, there were various studies on monkeys with lessons to the hippocampus and surrounding cortex area have been invaluable in learning about the contributions of the medial temporal lobe to primate these memory systems. There were so what are the main reasons or goal of such research to develop this animal model of human memory and amnesia? Through some research work, there were some models, and they provide actually the key information about the relation between the specific memory area of the brain and how it relates with the main structures of the brain. So several animal aspects ranging from invertebrates to monkeys have been investigated for clues to human memory and its functional neuroanatomy and neurobiology. It is likely that monkeys will contribute the most directly applicable knowledge about human processes. So there were other experiments mainly to verify the surgical lessons where they were created in the medial temporal lobe and the amygdala of monkeys. In the famous work that we can find in 1978, Mortimer Miskin at the famous National Institute of Mental Health (NIMH), the hippocampus or the amygdala, or both the hippocampus and the amygdala of the monkeys were removed surgically, and he found that the amount of impairment as measured on tests varied according to what was lessened. So there were some other experiments and research works on monkey, on memory, where some portions of the hippocampus and amygdala both are removed, and what are the functions or findings of this removal of this portion, how it affects the memory. Then Zola and his colleagues in 1993 in the University of California at San Diego, they investigated with some other monkeys, where they performed more selective lessons of the brain of monkeys by distinguishing between the a border line between this amygdala and hippocampus, as well as the cortex area of the brain, and how it functions, what are the conditions, etc. Then there were some other research works to remove this hippocampus, amygdala, and both the these portions, and how it functions, and what are the areas, what are the main findings that were found out by this research works. So after that, I will shift to the next slide, which covers mainly the imaging the human brain and memory, where I will cover the episodic encoding and retrieval, then semantic encoding and retrieval, then procedural memory encoding and retrieval, and lastly the perceptual priming and implicit and explicit memory. So the imaging of the human brain and memory, it starts with the most important thing, in which it is very important to know that what is the PRS. PRS means the perceptual representation system. It actually covers the episodic memory, the semantic memory, the procedural memory, and together it is known as perceptual representation system. Now, this episodic or encoding and retrieval, by the help of some imaging technique like PET, that is the positron emission tomography, and we can easily get the image, how our brain functions, the functional magnetic resonance imaging, that is the fMRI. There were some other techniques that found the encoding. We can easily know how the encoding process and the recognition part actually functions. And PET, it is one of the most important state tests of functioning, where it is a scan, PET scan, and where it records what are the changes going on in the regional cerebral blood flow and triggered by local neural activity. So these investigators, they observe the right hippocampus, how it works and how it helps the encoding process, the recognition process, and the retrieval process one by one. Now, where you know that encoding, it actually activated the left prefrontal cortex, whereas recognition activated the right prefrontal cortex, and thus we have more support for the hippocampus role in memory, as well as possible support for hemispheric asymmetrics in memory function. Then this, sorry, excuse me, please mute, please hello.
Please, who is disturbing us?
Ibrahim Abdul Mun'im, mute your mic.
Hello. Sorry.
Please mute in yourself.
Please mute yourself. Please. I request everyone to mute. Hello. Okay. So this episodic encoding and retrieval that I told you, it is a most important part. There were various image or test systems like PET or positron emission tomography, then fMRI, MRI, etc., where we can get a clear picture of the functioning of the brain. Then the semantic encoding and retrieval, it is the the next part is the encoding and the retrieval of the semantic knowledge, and it also have been studied using the functional neuroimaging, and significant new findings have been covered, and in particular evidence for the domain specific organizations. Then comes the procedural memory encoding and retrieval, where the earlier, as we have learned that the amnesic demonstrate implicit learning on the motor sequence or any type of other memories, that is the explicit memories. How this amnesic, it provides the powerful evidence that implicit learning need not be mediated by explicit knowledge about the material. So how it happens, that is the procedural memory encoding and retrieval. And then comes the perceptual priming and the implicit and the explicit memory, where the most important work of Daniel Schachter and his colleagues in 1996 at Harvard University, they investigated on the neural basis of some perceptual priming, that is the implicit learning, in the PET study, or PET tests of imaging the brain. And the scanning was performed only during the task, and subjects manifested implicit priming behaviorally. No activations or deactivations were noted in the hippocampus, but only the blood flow in the bilateral occipital cortex was shown in that image or PET scan, and for which the conclusion from this and other studies are that implicit and the explicit retrieval of information is subserved by separate brain system, and together with the face encoding data, there were some other research work on this, by obtaining some research works from some animal and as well as human lessons data. We can he concluded, or they concluded mainly, that the hippocampus, it encodes the new information, but also retrieves the recent information when explicit recollection is involved. Now this the next slide, I will proceed to the next slide, that is the cellular the cellular basis of learning and memory, where the most important is the Hebb's law of long-term potential and memory performance, where in Donald Hebb in 1949, he was an Canadian psychologist, and Hebb, he rules his rule states that if a synapse between two neurons is repeatedly activated at about the same time, the postsynaptic neuron fires, and the structure or the chemistry of the neuron changes, and the synapse will be strengthened, and this is known as the Hebbian learning. And later on, it is also known as the long term potential, that is LTP, a more general and more complex mechanisms, where in this process the neural circuits in the hippocampus that are subjected to repeated and intense electrical stimulation develop hippocampal cells that become more sensitive to this stimuli. Now, this long-term potentials and memory performances, how it happens, there were various research works, mainly by Badley in 1993, where the disrupting the process of long term potentials, say through different drugs, or also disrupts learning and memory, then chemically blocking the LTP, that is in the hippocampus of normal mice, impairs their ability to demonstrate normal place learning, and thus blocking this LTP prevents the normal spatial memory. So in the similar way, the genetic manipulation also, how it happens, that means the block the cascade of this molecular triggers for LTP, and also the impair spatial learning. So this was all about the cellular basis of learning and memory. Then the next slide is about the models of this information processing. So for which the most important model that I will discuss in brief, that is the Vogue and Normals model of primary and secondary memory. That is Vogue and Norman in 1965. His famous theory is dualistic. That means the primary memory, or it is known as PM, a short-term storage system, is conceptualized independent of the secondary memory, which is known as SM, and the long-term storage system. So Vogue and Norman borrowed freely from William James' dichotomy of this primary and secondary memory, and illustrates their theory by means of this model. That is, if by a help of a stimulus, it goes to the primary memory, and in this primary memory, this stage, the forgotten happens, and by the help of some rehearsal or learning this from this primary memory, it goes to the secondary memory. So this was the main model of this primary and secondary memory adapted from Vogue and Norman. And primary memory is known as PM and secondary as SM. The same thing, just like the STM and the LTM, that is the short-term memory and the long-term memory. Then later on, by Atkinson and Shiffrin, the stage mentioned model, it is known as the stage model, where Atkinson and Shiffrin 1968, the key elements of this model are that it views the learning and the memory as a discontinuous and multi-stage. So from the external stimulus, any knowledge, anything comes to the sensory memory, then in this stage only forgotten takes place. Then by initial processing, it goes to the short-term memory, and by the help of the rehearsal, from this short-term memory stage, forgotten takes place, and then it goes to the, by the help of some rehearsal or learning it again and again, it goes to the long-term memory for the storage. So this is the main model or the stage model, rather stage model of memory of Atkinson and Shiffrin 1969. So here he mentioned the sensory input, that means from the environment that we are getting, and this input is held for a very brief time, several seconds, and then it the sensory is memory is registered, and then it is channelized by the vision, the hearing, touch, and so forth. Then by it stays in half second, then for visual, then for auditory it is 4 to 5 seconds, then it transferred to the next stage of processing of the critical importance, and the sensory memory acts as the portal of all the information that is to become the part of this memory. Now, this information that is attended to and recognized in the sensory memory may be passed to the second stage, that is the short-term memory, or it is also known as the working memory or STM, where it stays for 20 to 30 seconds. Then by the help of some rehearsal, that is by having attention focused on it, or perhaps by being repeated over and over, maintenance rehearsal, or perhaps by being processed in some other way that will link it up with other information. Generally, 5 plus 2 numbers of units can be processed at any given time in STM, and then it by the help of some rehearsal it goes to the LTM, where the information is not lost, it stays for a longer time, maybe days, months, years, or lifetime. And this organizations of this long term memory, how it happens, there were other research works, mainly by Brunner and Anderson in 1998, where it was mentioned that based upon the idea of categorization, Brunner's theory states to perceive is to categorize, to conceptualize is to categorize, to learn is to form categories, to make decisions is to categorize. Then again, there were some other research work by Talvin in 1972, where he mentioned or distinguished between what is the episodic memory and the semantic memory. Now, episodic memory, which gives a subject um, or the sense of remembering the actual situation or event, whereas semantic memory, it deals with the general abstract information and can be recalled independently of how it was learned. Then there were some other research works of Pavio in 1971, later on in 1986 again, where it was stated that imagery is not a distinct organizational structure but follows the rules that apply to semantic and the episodic memory. Now, after that, how this imagery actually takes place, or what are the procedural memory, that means how the knowledge is stored, and the recall instructions, the type of memory which is defined in terms of this learned skills and the ability to recall the instructions like memory, and how this imagery is a main structure of this storage system. This was also mentioned by some research works. Then the information processing in 3-stage model that we already learned the Atkinson Shiffrin model, where it was mentioned the specific 3-stage model. Then what are the main, sorry, I have to connect the charger, sorry, just a minute. Okay, so then what are the levels of recall? The levels of recall, firstly, the famous Russian psychologist P.I. Jensenko, 1968, and later on in again 1981, there were various studies on this level of recall, how it happens, what are the stages of it, and the memorability of words, how it happens, what are the goals, the timing of the material, and the ability of the material that is recalled, etc., the ability of the person who is recalling that, etc., and also the age is very important. So there were various theses which actually tested in an experiment in which subjects were given 10 series of 4 words. And the first word was to be connected to one of the other words, like but the instruction varied for each of 3 groups. For example, the series may be house, House, window, building, fish. So in the first condition, the subject were asked to identify the word whose meaning was different from the first word, house and fish. In the second condition, the subject were asked to make a concrete connection between the first word and the one of the other words like house and window. Whereas in the third condition, the subjects were asked to make a logical connection between the first word and the one of the other three words, that is the house and the building. So this was the research work where the instructions were given to the subjects accordingly, and the findings were what are the conditions of or how the logical connections, or what are the how the subjects actually memorize, how they recall, what are the meaning of this, how it helps in recalling, the cues of recalling, etc. And the level of recall, that is LOR, it was mentioned by Zenchenko through his experiments, where he said that recall of the material was affected greatly by some instructions given to the by the experimenter to the subject. And there were various Russian researchers who said that yes, recall is one of the most important aspects of memory by some experiments and models. Then the levels of processing by the Craig and Lockhart. Craig and Lockhart in 1972, they mentioned these levels of processing, that is LOP model, where as a reaction against the boxes in the head scheme of memory, which was previously given by some researchers and is consistent with that view. And there were some shallow sensory analysis and proceeding to deeper, more complex, abstract and semantic analysis of this. Then how this pattern recognition happens, what are the or how we actually memorize by the meaning of it, and it may engage the subject's long-term association, and with deeper processing, a greater degree of this semantic or this cognitive analysis is undertaken. Then later on, there were various other research works on this, mainly by Craig and Lockhart in 1972. There they mentioned that at the highest level, the recognized pattern may trigger the associations, that is the images or stores on the basis of the subject's past experience with the word. There were some significant issues on that point of view, and so we are capable of perceiving at meaningful levels before we analyze the information at a more primitive level. There were some other processing or the levels of processing mentioned here by Craig and Lockhart, and how we actually memorize, what are the processes. And the first and the most important model where they mention the maintenance rehearsal, deeper levels, then comes the proofreading, then gist, and then elaborate rehearsal. So this is the processes of, or the levels of processing. And this model actually depicts the memory activation involved in proofreading a passage as contrasted with that involved in reading the same passage for the gist of the material. So proofreading, that is looking at the surface of the passage, involves elaborate shallow processing and minimal semantic processing. Then later on, one clear differences were noticed between some theories by Vaughan and Norman and Atkinson and Schifrin, and the levels of processing theory, Craig and Lockhart. And in the former, they said that rehearsal or repetition of information in short-term memory serves the function of transferring it to the long-lasting memory store, or the LTM, long-term memory. And in the latter, the rehearsal is conceptualized as either the maintaining information at one level of analysis or elaborating the information by processing it to a deeper level. So the first type, maintenance rehearsal, will not lead to better retention. There were some other research works by Craig and Tulvin in 1975 where they tested the idea that words that are deeply processed should be recalled better than those that are less so. And then later on, the next portion, that is the self-reference effect. It is a very important stage where Roger, Cooper, Kirker in 1977, their famous research work mainly focused on this self-reference effect, and the narcissistic trait modifications of this original experiment. They have mentioned why it is narcissistic, because it is the self-reference effect, and there was some argument also on this self-reference task later on, where they have mentioned that if you are asked to evaluate a personality trait as being self-descriptive, such as greedy, loving, or angry, you are engaging a very powerful self-schema and organized systems of internal attributes that is constellated around the topic of this I, me, and mine. So this was known as this narcissistic trait modification. Later on, the next part is the connectionist parallel distributed processing, or the model of memory. Rumelhart and McClellan's famous research work, it covers mainly the like there were many other people or associated with this model of human cognition, but this David Rumelhart and James McClellan, they have done the most formalized theory on this particular basis, and essentially the model is neurally inspired, concerned with the kind of processing, the mechanisms of the human mind, how it works. Here they mention the mainly the systems or the PDP models. They assumes that information processing takes place through the interactions of a large number of simple processing elements called the units, and each sending excitatory or inhibitory signals to other units. So it was the most important statement by McClellan, Rumelhart, and Hilton. This research work was in 1986, and these units they mention may stand for possible guesses about the letters in a string of words or notes on a score. Then in other situations, the units may stand for possible goals and actions like reading anything, like playing, or doing some specific work or noting anything. So proponents suggest that these PDP models are concerned with the description of the internal structure of larger units of cognitive activity, such as say for example perceiving anything, reading, writing, processing any sentences, comprehending anything, etc. So the connectionist of or this PDP model, they attempts to describe the memory from even the finer grained analysis of the processing unit, and this fundamental assumptions of this PDP model is that mental processes takes place through a system of highly interconnected units, and which takes on activation values and communicate with each other, and these units together helps in memorizing anything. So this is the most important aspect of this connections. That means the connection between the small units together. Then these units can be compared to atoms, say for example, and in that both are building blocks for more complete structures and combine with others of their kind to form the larger network. So a neuron in the brain is a type of unit that combines with other neurons in a parallel processing mode to form the larger system. So these units are then organized into modules, much as just like the atoms are organized into molecules, and the number of units per module range from the thousands to millions. And each unit, it receives the information from other modules, and after processing passes information to the next module. So in this model, this information is received, is permitted throughout the model, and leaves the traces behind when it passed through. So these traces change in the strength and sometimes called the weight of it, of the connections between the individual units in the model. So this was the main idea, how these units, or what are the connections, or how it happens, and what are the functions of this totality of these units. There were various other research works on this, in mainly the research work in 1986, where a small boy sees many different dogs, each only once and each with a different name. Now all the dogs have slightly different features, but can be considered a variation of the prototype dog, the epitome of dogness. The boy forms a memory for a prototypical dog on the basis of experience with exemplar dogs, and as in the case of faces, the boy is likely to recognize the prototype dog as a dog. So even if he has never seen it, of course, the boy is not likely to remember the names of each of the individual dogs, though the most recently seen dog may still be in memory. Then what are the rationale offered by the connectionist model for prototype formation in the case of the boy and his prototype dog is that each time the boy sees a dog, a visual pattern of activation is produced over several of the units in the module. And again, there were some contrasts like the name of the dog's procedure, the particular type of dog mentioned, etc. So this is how this connectionist model of memory has won many disciplines in the past few years, and by which we can get an help of the mathematical models too in the later on. So this was all about today's introduction part, and mainly it covers the 4 units that I told you in the first slide. So we have only 5 minutes. So if you have any question, so you can please ask. Okay. So I'm stop sharing this slide. Yes. Yes, somebody raised hands. Yes. Hello. Am I audible? Hello. Yes, any question? Yes, Jivans. Unmute yourself, please. Please add me to the group. Sorry, you have to inform to RCI Kolkata regarding this. Yes, any question? Please.
Hi, I had one question.
Yeah.
So, all those slides that you've been showing us, is there any recommended deeper reading that we have to do?
Yes. There are some materials that I think they will give to you. So you can go through the study materials. There you will get the detail of all these points that I have discussed today in the slides. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Any question? Yes, you have raised your hands. You can ask.
Okay, hello, ma.
Hello.
Okay, I'm going to ask, please, can we get the slides, this PowerPoint that you have finished
Yes, I
presenting
will
to
sure.
the
I will.
LMS?
Okay. I will
Thank
share
you.
this whole PPT with you all. I
Okay,
will
thank you,
tell.
ma.
Okay. And also I can share some important questions on this particular 4 units of this cognitive psychology, so that it will help in your studies. Okay.
Hello, ma.
Yes,
Hello.
ma'am, please.
Yes. Mhm.
Hello, ma.
Hello.
Yes, ma. My question is that the assignment that you're supposed to answer, is this handwriting or type one?
Sorry.
The assignment that we are asked to answer in our key
Assignments.
content.
Yes.
Yes.
Hmm.
It is
You
handwriting
will.
that you're supposed to submit or type one.
Regarding this assignment, you have to talk with IGNOU office. Okay. They will
Okay, ma.
help you.
Okay.
Okay. Any other
Thank you.
question?
Hello, ma.
Hello.
Okay, are we going to get this recording of this meeting?
Yes. Yes. Sure. You will get this recording of this whole class.
Okay, thank
So
you, ma.
for this, you have to take the help of IGNOU Kolkata. So they will
Okay,
provide
ma.
you the PPT, the recording of the class, as well as the study materials, so that you can
Okay.
study in detail on all the points that I have discussed.
Okay, thank you, ma.
Okay.
Hi, good day, everyone.
Hi.
Actually, I want to sincerely appreciate the way you present this
Thank
class.
you. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
My question is based on neuropsychological basis of learning and memory.
Okay.
Yes,
So
ma.
in which part you want an explanation, or?
Yeah, I want you to at least share more light on memory consolidation and hippocampus, because I learned that it's comprised both human and animal distinct memory. Can
Okay.
you please
Yeah.
yes, can you please share more light on it? Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Any more question you can ask? Yes. Yes. Jivesh. Yes. Any question?
Hello, good morning, ma. Good afternoon, ma.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Please, I need more explanation about information processing.
Information processing. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. What type
Thank
of
you.
explanation do you want? The models of information processing or the theories? Which part?
The theories.
Okay. So I will send the whole PPT. So after that, if you mention that which part you need the explanation, then it would be clear for me to explain you. Okay, it's almost time. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. We will meet again in the next class.
Okay,
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma. We really appreciate. Do have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, ma'am.
That we are catching.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
How do you say thank you in India?
Nice to meet you all.
Prince Danso, talk now. You are smiling.
Madam, how do you say thank you in India?
Shukriya, ma'am.
Okay, Shukriya. Thank you. Okay, I'm leaving. We will meet again in the next class and we will discuss the next units of cognitive psychology, mainly the memory portion, the learning, and the other parts of this MAPC 001. And before that, you will get the recording of the class as well as the PPT. I will definitely try to share if there are any other study materials that will help you in studies. Okay. So thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you very much, ma'am.